Sprint has severed ties with LightSquared and will pay back $65 million it received from the troubled wireless network startup. This after LightSquared was unable to get regulatory approval to build its network over concerns it would interfere with GPS devices. This is the latest headache for Sprint CEO Dan Hesse, who tried to buy T-Mobile, but AT&T got in the way. He tried to buy Metro PCS, but the board wasn't into it. And Sprint is not participating in today's iPad excitement because it does not carry the device. 5 years ago, Sprint was worth $57 billion. Today, it is worth a fraction of that. And for more on Sprint's struggles, I'm joined by Derek Kerton, a telecom consultant with the Kerton Group and chairman of the Telecom Council of Silicon Valley. Derek, if you're a sports team and you finish in third, sometimes based on the playoff structure, you can still make the playoffs.
That's true.
But here's a company in third place which is in a tough spot.
It is. It's a tough spot, and it's also, it's not like a sports league with a normal distribution of teams. You've got team 1 and 2 way out in front,
right,
and the next racers are kind of trailing behind.
We talk a lot about spectrum, and in the case of Sprint, here's a company that has, I believe, a lot more real estate than it has customers. Is that not true?
That's right, and you mentioned secret weapon would be one of the things I mentioned, and the amount of spectrum that Sprint has really is an asset that they can leverage going forward in the future. Spectrum is the precious resource of wireless telecom companies. It's kind of the fertile soil that they can plant their networks into. So if you look at it on a farming and agricultural basis, Sprint has the biggest fields and the most soil, but they don't yet have the equipment, the capital equipment, to kind of leverage that and produce results.
And in the meantime, one of the ways they try to bring in more customers is with all-you-can-eat plans. We know what AT&T has been saying about those plans, and you get the sense that AT&T and Verizon don't love that Sprint really pushes that buffet-style pricing.
Right. This is one of the competitive advantages you can have when you have a lot of spectrum, is to offer unlimited, where the other carriers that are having, frankly, more success in the marketplace and filling up their networks, they have to start containing their customers, AT&T and Verizon. Whereas Sprint, for two reasons. One, the spectrum they have, but also the fact that they're not winning the customer adoption race. They have that leeway to say, listen, the customers we have, you can use more.
So we're talking a lot about the new iPad today. It's not something that Sprint is offering. How come?
Well, Sprint uses different network technologies, so that's the main problem that you have. And that's actually one of the main problems that structurally that Sprint has as a company, is they have a lot of disparate and incongruous network technology and spectrum. So they have the former assets bought from Nextel at 800 megahertz that use IDEN technology. They have CDMA assets at 1900 megahertz, and they have their partner Clear, which is operating a WiMAX network right now at 2.5 megahertz. So it's fairly widely distributed, and it's not globally standard. So you can't go to a manufacturer like Apple and say, hey, will that work on our network automatically? They have to custom design it to work on Sprint's network.
How do the carriers generally feel about selling tablets and selling iPads?
You know, for a while, it was perhaps a hope for them. Hey, we can sell tablets and sell a lot more data subscriptions. But what happened was the phones started using up most of their data capacity in the first place. So there's a bit of a fear that this tablet will consume a lot of data. And then secondly, the market actually proved that that was not something consumers absolutely wanted to do. People were buying tablets, and the majority are opting for Wi-Fi only tablets because they find I sit in my living room or I sit at my workplace. There's a lot of portable use, but not highly mobile. Tablets aren't used as often in cars as they are in
So you're kind of saying Apple might end up selling 1 million iPads today, but as for how many wireless plans tied to those iPads, it will be a much smaller amount?
That's absolutely right. ABI Research has come up with a figure that of devices with embedded cellular modems in them, so consumer electronics devices that have the ability to connect to cellular, about 40% of those only connect to the cellular network. So a lot of people are buying things that have the ability and choosing not to connect them. And those are just the ones that have the cellular radio in it. Don't forget the majority of iPads are sold with just Wi-Fi only.
Now, Sprint does sell iPhones, but they obviously got into that late, and it has been a costly move on their part. And at this stage, people can get iPhones anywhere, so there's no advantage to be a single carrier. What does a guy like Dan Hesse, the CEO, do? I mean, what is his game plan?
You know, in some senses, Dan is in battle right now, but he's done a lot of good stuff. And getting the iPhone was a coup and a really good move for Sprint that they didn't get a bump at the market from. People saying, you don't have the iPhone, that's a problem. Then they got it, and people said, that deal costed you too much. But really, was it free for AT&T or was it free for Verizon? No, it cost every carrier a lot of money because they have to subsidize those devices very heavily. And in the case of Sprint, as I said, with their different network technologies, they actually had to make a guarantee of a purchase volume contract with Apple to get it. And that's the number that the street looked at and said, oh my God, that's a big commitment for a company that has capital issues.
But, you know, for a company like Sprint, how do you go out there and create shareholder value? That's what Sprint planned to do when they hired Dan Hesse. And since he's been the CEO, I think the stock's down like 80%.
Right. So, you know, that's Sprint is a company where all of the negative news has been thoroughly imputed in the price, but maybe some of the opportunities haven't yet been put into the street price. And some of the opportunities they have to create shareholder value are, with this massive amount of spectrum they have, almost 100 megahertz in most regions around the U.S., they're able to build, if they got access to the capital, they would be able to build out more infrastructure, support a lot more customers. That works for their own subscribers. But you mentioned LightSquared kind of having its troubles, maybe not going to be around forever, and we'll see how they do. That's a different story. But that was the wholesale option that companies like Best Buy were looking to, saying, hey, we're Best Buy, we'd like to be a cell phone company, we're going to ride on LightSquared's network and offer Best Buy branded cellular services bundled in laptops and things. Well, those people need to turn to somebody else now.
Sure.
And who has the most spectrum and the ability to welcome them? It's Sprint. So Sprint is announcing that a lot of people that had been LightSquared customers, like Cricket is a wireless company, are now moving to Sprint as their wholesale vendor. So there's opportunity there, among other ways of taking advantage of that spectrum.
Interesting. Derek, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Derek Kerton of the Kerton Group.